There are, I've been practicing as a dietitian for about 20 years and working specifically in sports nutrition for about 15 of those. And I do a lot of presentations to families as well as teams. I'm actually going to be at a Worthington Middle School on Monday afternoon. So maybe some of your kids will be there again. I also work with athletes one-on-one to help them figure out what to eat and when to really enhance their performance. I am a high school and also collegiate athlete. I did track and cross country and had a lot of trial and error with my fueling. I really didn't get it all figured out until I was in college. And then even after that, I didn't really learn how to eat until I worked with a woman who was pregnant, and I began to appreciate the importance of snacks. So I feel like when I'm working with athletes, whether that's anywhere from middle school all the way through a recreational adult athlete, we're all trying to figure it out, and it doesn't have to be super complicated. So my goal tonight is to give you just some really basic sort of big picture nutrition, and then kind of dive into some scenarios that apply to soccer and how do we fuel our athletes, especially on tournaments, which are tricky to fuel for. So I have a couple kiddos who are 8 and 10 who love to be involved in sports. And I think that was one of our questions that we wanted to ask about is, for those of you on the call, I'm curious, how many of you have, let's see, if we look at all the pictures, how many of you have a middle school student? Okay. And anyone have a high school student? Okay. And then elementary? Okay. Great. So I can see 6 people in my little view here. I'm not sure how to make it bigger, but that's helpful as I go along. If you have questions pertaining to what we're talking about, please ask. Some of them we may just shift to the end, but I like to hear questions as we go along. Ultimately, your kids are doing a lot of work and we want them to be successful in what they're doing. And so if we can help them have that food on board so that when they go to practice, they feel good. When they're in a tournament, they have good energy, they recover well, so they're able to then perform again well for the next game. We avoid injuries, we keep them from getting hangry. Those are our goals. Ultimately, the purpose is we want them to be able to function well. And so we want to make sure that we're putting the right fuel in. We also think about like eat to compete. Sometimes kiddos feel a little nervous about what they're eating before they go play. And so when we're thinking about fueling our kids, these are sort of big picture ideas. Their bodies are like batteries where they need to be charged at regular intervals. So every 3 to 4 hours is a good guideline. And this works both for your children who are athletes, but also it's very applicable to you as an adult. Like every 3 or 4 hours, your body is ready for a little bit more energy to kind of carry you through. So this may be in between meals, I know that our schools are much more open to students bringing snacks. In fact, our elementary school is like, please send a snack with them. They'll be starving sort of mid-morning and we can't supply all those snacks. So we want to fuel them every 3 to 4 hours, and we want to think about what that is. And I know that as a parent, your kids have specific foods that they like to eat, and you may or may not, those may not be your preferences for them to eat. And so we're trying to figure out this balance. Ultimately, we want something that's going to give them energy. And those types of foods typically are carbohydrate sources. So if we think about food groups, it would be sort of your grains and cereals, your fruits, your vegetables, dairy, also nuts, seeds, beans. So most of the food groups have some sort of carbohydrate, and that's really their first form of energy, both for their brains as a student but then also their brains as an athlete to be able to remember what they're doing on the field. But it also fuels their muscle. And so that carbohydrate is actually stored in the muscle so that when they're running on the field, it's right there available to them. For you as a parent, those carbohydrates are important for you because you also have a full day of work that you're doing, and you need to be able to navigate all the different schedules to get your kids to where they need to go. So we want to make sure we're doing that carb piece, but we also want to put some protein and fat with it. If you think about, like, if you would have an apple as a snack or a piece of toast, that's going to fuel you for a little bit, but then you're going to kind of need something else. Your energy is going to fall off. For our kids, like, they would love to have a bag of chips or a granola bar or a Pop-Tart or Cinnamon Toast Crunch, but those foods are going to like kind of boost their energy and then kind of drop them down. And that's going to also impact their mood. So their mood will go up and then they'll kind of crash. So if we can put this like pairing of carbs and proteins and fats together, it gives them a more stable increase and then decline in energy. It helps them feel more full and satisfied. So I like to call this a powerful pair. And I'm always talking to, especially my oldest, he loves any kind of snack. So granola, bars, yogurt. But we're always talking about like, hey, what kind of protein can you put with that? So we're going to kind of walk through some examples. So fruit is a classic carbohydrate. It's great. It does have fiber, so that helps to feel full and for a longer period of time. But if we're going to put some sort of protein with it, then peanut butter is sort of a classic combination. And most kids like fruit and peanut butter or some sort of nut. If we had cereal or granola, yogurt would be a great combination, and it helps them just feel full and satisfied for longer. And especially for our middle school, high school students where they have a higher energy need, these are bigger snacks to help them meet those energy needs. Whole wheat wraps. So I brought some props. I am a loyal fan of Kroger. So here are some wraps from Kroger. They're whole wheat. They have 3 grams of fiber, which is good for our kids to help them feel full. They're whole wheat, so that's also a benefit. And then you can pair it with, we like to do a lot of peanut butter and jelly. So we put peanut butter and jelly and roll it up, or we do melted cheese, put it in and then roll that up. You could also do like ham and cheese sandwich with it too. But that could be a good, like, after school, I'm hungry, I need a bigger snack option. Okay. So those are some snack ideas. And I do have several handouts. I will email them to Kevin after this. I forgot to send them ahead of time, but I have a snack handout. And then I also have this one. This is, we've talked about sort of the powerful pair for snacking. This is more, hey, when we have a meal, we want it to look sort of like this. This is a very busy plate. So if we just look at the main part of it, we have 3 food groups. And that's really, when we think about a meal, what we want to shoot for. What's our trifecta? We have some protein. We want to have some sort of grain or starch, and then some vegetables. And I think sometimes with kids, that vegetable piece isn't as exciting. So if we can at least get some sort of veggie in at one point during the day, that's great. And if there's only a couple that they enjoy, just rotate back and forth and continue to like encourage them to expand their palate by continuing to offer different vegetables, along with things that they do enjoy, just to kind of build that exposure. Typically for our elementary kids, we want maybe like, if we think about the palm of your hand in terms of portion sizes, maybe like the deck of cards type for protein. For our middle school, maybe palm of hand. For high school, it could be sort of palm of hand and up, because their energy needs are so much higher with all the growth that they're doing.
Dawn, can I pause you
Yeah.
and press you on a question? Because this is something that's relevant to myself, and I'm sure
Yeah,
many
sure.
moms and dads on the call.
Mm-hmm.
Vegetable piece, right? So if our kids won't stomach something green, what can simulate the health benefits from vegetables? You know, are there other things that people could be eating or taking that would help provide their body the fuel that the vegetables give them that they just won't get
Yeah,
on their own?
sure. So if vegetables are an absolute no, then most of the time fruit is a yes, and that's a typical easy win. So then that's usually what I recommend. Like, hey, if there's even one vegetable, awesome. But if not, then let's just do lots of fruit because it's going to give you pretty similar benefits. And it's something that they would enjoy. The key is to try to do a variety of colors because each different color gives different health benefits. Yeah, that's a really good question. So if we kind of build a plate, I feel like tacos are an easy one. You can vary it in so many different ways. And it's one of the ways that my kids will eat foods that I wouldn't have expected them to. So it could be ground turkey, ground beef, shredded chicken, um, beans in there, pinto beans or black beans, refried beans. And you could do rice or tortillas or wraps, make like sort of like a taco nacho. And then you can have the vegetables with the corn and the tomatoes and the lettuce. My kiddo will eat tomatoes in a taco, but that's the only time he will. And so we try to do it more often because of that. But then you can also, we want to also put some other fats in there. So avocados, a little bit of cheese and sour cream. And then with beverages, my recommendation as a dietitian trying to fuel our kids well is that we try to do milk at meals. We're getting calcium, we're getting protein, we're getting carbohydrates. And I know most of the times as kids age, they kind of age out of milk. It doesn't have to be that way. I know some athletes who are like, oh no, I love it. So as long as you can tolerate it, I would encourage it to be there to help to build those bones because we're banking that calcium right now in those bones. If you can't tolerate dairy, perhaps it's a lactose intolerance, then there is a lactate milk that you could do. There's also a tablet you can take before you eat dairy that has that enzyme to digest it so that it's not uncomfortable. There's also soy milk, which provides a very similar nutrition profile in terms of protein and carbohydrates. The other milks, so the almond, the oat, the soy, the almond, the oat, I think those are the big ones. They just don't have the protein or the carbohydrates. It's more of a calcium fortified beverage. So it's a way to get calcium, but then you'll have to eat more protein and carbohydrates from foods, other foods. Okay. Okay, so this would be a good example of, hey, we're in season, we're having a couple practice sessions, like an hour or more practice session. This would be how we would want our plate to look. But then as we get into maybe tournament weekends or a training camp, then we would want our plate to look like, oh shoot. I did some fancy things with my PowerPoint, but it looks like when I'm sharing my screen, it's not doing that. Okay, so we'll just talk about it. So when we do, yeah, okay. If we have a tournament situation, so take this grain section and make it half the plate. The vegetables are a quarter, the protein is a quarter, but that grain section is half because we talked about when you're running and using those muscles, they're using carbohydrate as fuel and your brain is using carbohydrate. So if we are doing a tournament, we're having multiple games, the more time we spend running and exercising, the more grains we're going to need. So both the night before and that day of, we're going to need more. There it is. Okay. Okay. So this is sort of a snapshot of what does our day look like in terms of eating? Now we're going to go into a little bit more about, hey, what do we do around training? And if we think back to that every 3 to 4 hours, we want to be fueling. So before practice, right before, sort of on the way, like half an hour before, we want to put in simple carbohydrates. Your body needs sort of carbs to like kind of top off that battery. And these are things that will digest really quickly and kind of get into your system and just top off your tank. So bananas, pretzels, those are fantastic. I know fruit snacks are super popular. If you're going to do some sort of fruit, let's make sure it's 100%. So like applesauce, I like the unsweetened applesauce, or if you're going to do fruit snacks, the Welch's. I've also recently started shopping at Aldi and they have a lot of good stuff. So, oh, I have the blurred background. So let me see if I can change that and if you can see this better. There. So these are 100% fruit and you get a bunch for about $4. My kid really likes them and I'm happy to send them with him. So if we can do some sort of more close to the original food source, granola bars, graham crackers work really well. Now, if we think about, okay, I'm having practice, but I haven't eaten anything for a long time, then we may need to put some protein with that so that we're not hungry during practice. So like pretzels and peanut butter or pretzels and cheese, something like that. And we'll kind of go into that when we talk about our scenarios. Okay, during practice. So let's talk about hydration. I think that sometimes our kids hear us talking about this, but they may not understand why it's such a big deal. So the goal is that every time our kids are eating something, that they're drinking something. So we stay on top of that hydration. As our kids go through puberty and as they get more muscle and as they start sweating more, their fluid needs will go up. Muscle, your body is about 60% fluids, but in your muscle, it's 75%. So the goal when we're exercising is how do we keep that muscle cool for as long as possible? A hot muscle is a tired muscle and will fatigue faster. Hydration is cumulative, so what we do day in and day out throughout the course of the season impacts the end of the season. Water is best, especially for our elementary age athletes, mainly because they just don't have the sweat rates that the teenagers do. They're not losing as much sodium, and so water is often best. Now, leading up to practice, if we can do like a glass of water before we get to practice, that's a good way to kind of top off your fluids. Then during, the amount of fluid we want to be drinking every 15 to 20 minutes. So during practice, that's pretty easy. During a game, that's a little trickier. And for our younger athletes, maybe so for our elementary athletes, somewhere between 12 and 24 ounces each hour is a good target. For our older athletes who have a higher sweat rate, who are sweating more and have bigger bodies, it could be somewhere between like 18 and 32 ounces. I worked with a high school basketball player who was, I think, 6'5", and he would cramp up within 15 minutes, and he needed to drink at least like 35 ounces an hour, and it needed to be like a sports beverage because he just was sweating and losing so much sodium. So the preference is if we're exercising for less than an hour, we want it to just really, water is fine. If we're exercising for 2 hours, then that second hour, a sports drink like a Gatorade or a Powerade could be helpful because 1, it tastes good, and so it's easier to drink it. 2, it has carbohydrates, and after that first hour, our body needs some carbohydrates to keep us going. 3, it has the electrolytes, and so we're replacing what we're sweating out. Again, like probably for our more middle school, high school athletes, we would do that. For our younger athletes, we can just do salty snacks like pretzels when they come out. It's probably best. And then afterwards, we want to rehydrate. Oh, sorry. There's my sports drink talk after an hour. So this little guy, he plays baseball as well as soccer. And he really likes chocolate milk, and it's a good recovery beverage because it has like sort of all the things. When we think about recovery, we think about fluids. And if it's something your kids like to drink, they're going to drink more of it. We also think about protein. We need that to rebuild and repair that muscle. Milk or soy milk has that. We also need carbohydrates to replace what we've just used and to restore the carbohydrates in the muscle. And so this chocolate milk has that. Typically, our kids, we want them to do probably between 10 and 15 grams of protein. For our older high school athletes, maybe 15 to 20. And so chocolate milk is nice because, or a flavored milk, because we have that protein component, and then we have like 3 times that for the carbohydrates. This is the time if we're going to do some like sugarier type things, your body can absorb it well. But we also want to think about what are we putting in that's going to really benefit the athlete and help them to recover well and be ready for the next game. So if we think about games and sort of tournaments and we want to speed that recovery, we want to make sure that we get those carbohydrates in. So whether that's a chocolate milk or something else, we'll walk through some scenarios. Or maybe it's just like a bagel sandwich. Those have a lot of carbohydrates. We want to get those fluids in. And if you have an athlete who is really prone to cramping, then we want to, another way to approach that is, okay, are they doing like 18 to 24 ounces of fluid each hour? And if not, sort of work your way there gradually so that you're training the gut to tolerate more fluids. Are they really a salty sweater? So do they have like a gritty white residue? Do they have like, does it sting their eyes? Do they have like a white ring around their shirt? So then we want to make sure they're getting some sports drink in there to replace some of that salt. And then if you can, between games, take a little nap, or at least after that second game, make sure that you get some good sleep. For our teen athletes, 8 to 10 is good. For our elementary, so up to age 12, we need about 12 hours of sleep, somewhere between 10 and 12 hours of sleep. And if we're thinking about weekends and games, there's just lots of things to think through. So here's some ideas for what to pack and take with you. Ultimately, if you have the food with you, you're probably going to make better choices because there may or may not be a concession stand. There may or may not be great options at that. And so trying to take things, here's a bunch of different like carb things. So fruits are really good. I love this picture because grapes are very juicy, and especially if it's hot, those are going to feel more refreshing. They also have some protein there too. So like cheese sticks, they have some deli meat, but then they also have some guacamole. So something that's going to be a little bit more fat content to help you feel full. Packing sandwiches. I'm a big fan of Uncrustables because they're convenient and sometimes they feel cooler than maybe what you would really like for your kids to eat, but what they are willing to eat. So sort of, okay, I know that you love goldfish, but could we do like Teddy Grahams instead? Or I know that you like chips. Could we do pretzels and maybe at another time you could have chips instead of like on your game day when it's not really going to be the best fuel for you to recover from a game. And then here's some options for fluids. So water is awesome. When we get done with the game, we want to replenish what we've lost. So whether that's chocolate milk or a sports drink, depending on sort of the age of the kiddo. And then,
Question on that one. Oh, you're
yeah,
going
for
there.
sure.
You're going there. That's the question.
Okay. So I think that there sometimes is a misconception about how much is in different things. Like how much sugar And I think, so these are sort of a Gatorade, both, I looked at a Gatorade that was just 1 cup, and then I looked at a cup of apple juice, just to kind of compare how much, and I like to think of it as carbohydrates, because when you are physically active and fueling your body, we want to put carbohydrates in. And in these two beverages, those ultimately your body breaks it down into glucose. It's, if we look at the label, it's sugar, and sometimes added sugar. Typically in a juice, there's no added sugar. But in a sports drink, obviously they have to add something to make it sweet. And so there is sugar in there. Anyway, any guesses? So one of these is a cup of Gatorade. One of these is a 12-ounce bottle of Gatorade. And one of these is a cup of apple juice. Which one do you think is the 12 ounces of Gatorade? Any guesses? I would really love to hear like guesses.
Yeah, if you don't want to talk either, you guys can put it in the chat.
Yep, yep. Just say 1, 2, or 3. Which one is the 12 ounces of Gatorade?
Got some
And
twos.
say what?
You have some twos there.
Some twos?
Some
Okay.
twos. There's a couple threes. I got 3 twos and 2 threes.
Okay. Hey, nice job. Nice job. So it is this number 2, 80 calories, 22 grams of carbohydrate for that 12 ounces of Gatorade. If you just do a cup of Gatorade, then it's the first one. And if you do a cup of apple juice, it's the last one. So what I want to emphasize is that a sports drink is specifically made with an amount of carbohydrate that an athlete can use in while they're active in sport. It's not so much where it's going to spike their blood sugar and then drop them. It's enough where they can rapidly absorb it, but not negatively impact their game. If we had a glass of apple juice during the game, you would probably be too much and you would have a little bit of a stomach upset because it's too sweet. And juice is like half the carbs of like a lemonade or a soda. So this Capri Sun or the smaller juice boxes are similar to like the 12-ounce Gatorade in terms of carbohydrates and calories. So I guess in the appropriate situation, the sports drinks are a good option when it's hot and humid and they're exercising for over a couple hours. I'm happy to chat more about that later too. Okay. So we have our cooler, we played our game, and then we're done. Congratulations. Now we're still away from home, but we're going to eat something at a restaurant. And so when we're eating out, we still want to think about that athlete's plate and our trifecta. What's our protein? What's our carbs? What's our vegetable? Or what's our fruit that we're going to try to do? So I really feel like a lot of the places where you can build your own bowl, so whether Chipotle or Bibimbap or even Piata, like those type of places, you have a lot more flexibility and control over the quality of the food. If you are at a sandwich place, grilled chicken is typically the best option. And you could do like a small baked potato or a small fry. I feel like a small fry is a good compromise if you're getting like a grilled chicken and chocolate milk with your kiddos. Tacos are good because you can get a variety, and often actually Taco Bell, if you get the basic tacos, like there's the protein, there's lettuce and tomato, and you can get you can get a Gatorade there, I think, but sometimes what we do is we split it, like, hey, here's some for you and here's some for you, because the portion sizes are crazy. Or if you're eating at a restaurant, sort of like pasta with chicken and tomato sauce, and you could get some sides, vegetables. Okay, Great. So we're going to run through a couple scenarios, and I have copies of these. I am happy to share them with you. I can send them to Kevin and he can send them out, or you're welcome to email me directly and I can send them to you too. But I know that tournaments are a big part of soccer. And so I know we don't have tournaments quite yet, but coming up in about a month or so, yes. So you have 2 games on Saturday, one at 9, another at 11. You're pretty confident about breakfast, but not sure what to eat to have good energy for the second game, but not an upset stomach. So I kind of backtrack and like, hey, let's think about what we're doing the night before and think about that athlete's plate and make sure that we have a good half of that plate, like a strong carb plate. So it could be the classic pasta and meatballs. It could be a loaded baked potato bar. It could be like tacos with extra rice, things that are familiar for your kiddo, for your athlete, and they're used to eating. We don't want to do anything new the night before where their gut is like, whoa, what's going on? Breakfast. So this could be a couple hours before the game. Typically, the more time you have, the more food you can eat. So like cereal and milk, classic, easy. If we can do a cereal that's going to last a little longer. So maybe not Cinnamon Toast Crunch on game day, but maybe something like a Life or a Raisin Bran, where it's a little bit more, but also something they're used to eating. Or toast and peanut butter, glass of milk. Pancakes, and a little protein with that. So whether that's peanut butter or a little bit of ham, like Canadian bacon, banana, milk. And again, like it depends on your athlete and how much they like eating. If we have a couple hours, we can eat more. If we have less time, we eat a little bit less. But we want to make sure there's good carbs and some fluids there. Then we get to the game, we're on the way, we're drinking water, and then maybe we do a little snack, just carbs to kind of top off the tank. We have our game at 9. During the game, we focus on hydration. And again, I kind of listed it out specifically for younger athletes and then for teens so that you have it more specifically. But ideally every 20 minutes, but that may or may not happen in a game. So whenever they're coming out, sort of at the end, see how much they have drank and kind of gauge how much more we want them to try to catch up on. When we get done, yay, we did it, we finished. So around 10:30, we want to make sure that we get some recovery going. So fluids, carbs, those are our priorities, some protein. So we could do just a snack or we could do sort of a mini meal depending on how hungry your athlete is. So chocolate milk or a drinkable yogurt could be good options for carbs, proteins, fluids. And then we could do some sort of fruit and sandwich, peanut butter and jelly, grapes, some water to kind of switch that down. Or you could do something where it's more snacky. So most kids like sort of the Lunchable approach. So like cheese and crackers and like a trail mix. And maybe they do a sports drink with it. Now, if your kiddo isn't super hungry, then let's get those fluids in and get a little bit more carb. And then maybe we do a bigger, like, then we do maybe like another snack before the game. But between recovery and this game, we want to be drinking about 16 ounces of water in that time frame. And then before we warm up again, like, hey, let's do some quick carbs for a snack. So maybe pretzels and raisins, maybe some graham crackers. And if they're hungry, you can add some protein in. So maybe like some peanut butter or some cheese. Then we have our game and we're going to hydrate again. Now, if it's hot in the afternoon and you have an athlete who's going to sweat a lot and they're feeling kind of a little sluggish, then this would be an opportunity to, hey, let's do a sports drink. And maybe you alternate sports drink and water, or maybe it's just we're going to do the sports drink because you just need to get those fluids in and it's easier to drink that. Sometimes I'll dilute it and I'll do like in my water bottle, half water, half sports drink. And maybe that's like, feels like it's not too much or too light. Then we do our recovery again. This time we're just going to probably focus on fluids because it's around 2:30. we'll have our recovery meal around dinner time. And again, like sort of that athlete's plate focus. Now, if we have a game the next day, then this meal, we want it to be sort of like top notch, like high quality. Think about these types of foods and avoiding sort of more of those like very sweet drinks. So maybe avoiding the soda, avoiding the lemonades, because it's going to sort of spike up their energy and then drop them. Focus more on like 100% juice or low fat milk, or maybe even if they want something that's a little sweet, like unsweetened iced tea with lemonade. So like an Arnold Palmer type of thing, or just take the glasses are gigantic. So just do half of it and save the rest for later, or split it with another player. So there's some tournament ideas. And now an evening practice. So it's Tuesday and you have soccer practice from 5:30 to 7.
Hey, Dawn,
Yeah,
Dawn, let me just jump in before you
absolutely.
go. There was a question, because I think you alluded to this earlier in the call about graham crackers instead of goldfish crackers. So there's a question on the side that it says, do you prefer graham crackers over goldfish crackers? And then maybe if the answer is yes, which I think it is, then maybe expand a little bit on why that's a difference.
Yeah, so that is a good question. And honestly, I think I haven't looked super closely at the nutrition parameters. What I do know is goldfish are really salty, and they have a pretty strong flavor. And so if an athlete is eating it before a game, it may not sit as well as something more bland like graham crackers. If they're eating it afterwards, it's probably not a bad idea because it's salty and it'll make them want to drink. So that could be an appropriate situation for that. I know graham crackers are a athlete favorite. So I definitely would vote for, sorry, did I say goldfish? I know goldfish are an athlete favorite. So I think it's fine. I just would caution its use before the game and prefer it afterwards. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I guess while we have the tournaments up, the next thing we'll do is evening practice. But do you have any questions about tournaments specifically that we could talk about?
There's another question that I would say is relevant on tournament weekends. So
Yeah.
I'll share what's in there too. So the question is, do you have thoughts about Gatorade Zero versus regular strength Gatorade?
Yeah. So I'll say it really depends. And I think with nutrition, I can give you big picture ideas, but honestly, in order to be like really specific, I kind of have to know the situation, but I'll give you sort of my big perspective. So Gatorade Zero will have the electrolytes, which is good. So if we have a kiddo who is a heavy sweater, and has a hard time getting those electrolytes in just from food, then this could be a good option. I still would probably not use it until like the second hour worth of training. If it's a kiddo who really does need the additional fuel that second hour of training, then I would do the full strength Gatorade. If it's more of it feels too strong for me, then I would probably just dilute it with water. I think because sometimes artificial sweeteners don't sit as well with certain people. I mean, we have lots of different colors in there too. So I guess the short answer is it depends. So I'm happy to chat more specifically if you want to at the end, or you could email me specifically and we can talk through it a little bit more. Okay.
Thanks. I think you can move on for the next one, and
Okay.
then we'll take some more on the side as they come. So
Gotcha. So, okay, we have an evening practice. I know this is always tricky because soccer practice 5:30 to 7. Thinking about what do you pack for lunch so you have a good start, and then what else will you eat before practice? So we kind of want to go back to that trifecta. Typically lunch is kind of early. It really depends though. So if lunch is early, we're taking lunch. Here's some different options. We want to make sure like it's a pretty decent lunch. I think sometimes when my kids love to buy lunch, but they'll just eat the entree and then everything else kind of gets tossed, or the entree and the chocolate milk. And so they come home and they're starving. And I think that's pretty realistic for most kids. They get hungry, that when they get home from school, they're ready to have a really decent snack. And so being able to have things available that are going to fuel them well versus they open the snack cupboard and they're like, ooh, those chips look good. And ooh, I really want, let's see, what do they really want? Can I have candy? Nope. No, let's not do candy now. But okay, so I know that you really like yogurt. Can you put granola with it? Or frozen burritos? My kids really like them. They're super easy. They can make them themselves. They just pop them in the microwave, but they're like a really decent snack. Put some fruit with it that they like. So think about it sort of like, hey, this is sort of early dinner slash afternoon lunch, but make it a decent sized snack, because then we have to go to practice and we're not going to eat probably closer to 7:30. So make this a decent, and then we go to practice. We want to make sure we're drinking water on the way. We're having a snack on the way too. And if they're hungry, put a little bit of protein with that. We have practice. We're going to focus on fluids. And then on the way home, if we can start that recovery on the way home from practice, it's going to help them so that typically when we get done exercising, we're not super hungry. All the blood flow has been diverted from our gut. So if we can put fluids in, it helps to start that recovery, gives the gut time to kind of reacclimate. And then when we get home, then we're ready for dinner. And so dinner could be things that they enjoy, but kind of with a parental, I'm trying to help you to recover well slant. So my kids like meatball subs, so we have good protein there. We could do a whole wheat bun. We could do broccoli and then some milk. Or hey, if it feels like everyone else is done and they just want something kind of fun, like peanut butter and jelly on a bagel, a big glass of milk so we get a little bit more protein, maybe a banana with it. Or quesadillas are super versatile. You could use those whole wheat tortillas that I showed you. Whatever protein is around, throw some extra veggies in there. You could do a side of like carrots and ranch. So trying to get like, hey, what do you like to eat? And how can we kind of like elevate it a little bit so that you're getting vegetables, you're getting whole wheat food, like whole grain foods, some protein in there that's relatively lean. And then of course, like we want to make sure that they're getting good rest, and that when they're sleeping is like their second recovery. Their body's remembering what they learned in practice, their muscles are recovering and rebuilding. If they're up, like for our teenagers or high school students, if they're up again, like 3 or 4 hours after dinner, it's fine for them to do a bedtime snack as well. Something dairy based. It's going to help them have that fuel on board for while they're sleeping to do additional recovery. I have just sort of a summary slide of what we've talked about. We want them to eat consistently every 3 to 4 hours, really like do that powerful pairing when they're eating snacks, have that trifecta at their meals, make sure they're hydrating throughout the day, sleeping well. I also wanted to share some of my favorite resources. You can feel free to email me questions or reach out to me. I work with athletes one-on-one. If you have more specific questions and you want to be like, hey, my athlete is just, I don't know, they're cramping by halftime, or they're just really tired at the end of the season. They just are sore all the time. They're just really tired. But then here at the bottom are a couple fantastic Instagram accounts to follow. They post pictures all the time of great snack ideas, what to eat before practice, what to eat for your recovery meals. I highly recommend that your kids follow them instead of maybe some of the other things that you don't want them to. So I just so appreciate your time, and I would love to answer any questions that you have.
So I'll
Do you have
ask
any
one.
thoughts on
Okay.
those? Oh, sorry, Kevin.
No, you go right
All right,
ahead.
I'll ask a question. Do you have any thoughts on those like the kids Cliff Bars or kid what are they? Yeah, like kid Cliff Bars, the Z protein
Z
Z
bars?
bars or the things? Yeah.
Okay, so the Z bars are great. They're super expensive, but they are really nice. I think when you're looking, so Cliff Bar is my favorite, one of my favorite sports bars. And so the reason I love it is just the sort of ratios of carbs and proteins and fats. So if you're at the store and you're trying to figure out what's a good option, pick up a Cliff Bar and look at like how much carbs, protein, and fat, and then compare it to whatever you are looking at. Um, so I think the Z bar still is really nice because it does have a little bit of protein. I think it has 5 grams, which is a nice amount for like an elementary or middle school student. The Cliff Bar I think has like 12, so it's a little bit more. I also wanted to show you these. I can't see myself right now, but these are sort of like a generic kind bar. They're very nut based, so they're a little bit more satisfying if your kiddo is hungry. Also trail mix. But yes, so I think with bars, trying to find one that your child likes, but then also one that has a little bit of protein. But not a protein bar necessarily where it's all protein and no carbohydrate. It's a good balance.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
So I have a question too. I also wanted to share something I heard, and I'd almost be curious to get your take. Someone once told me a rule of thumb was the fewer legs it has, the better it is for you in terms of thinking about protein. Like,
Oh, okay.
red meat, pigs, 4 legs, turkey, chicken, 2, fish doesn't have any legs. The kids like that because then they get creative about things that don't have legs, in terms of what they're gonna eat. But wonder if that has, that's a general that our guys remember in the high school program. So that's just
Yeah.
something to share.
I think that's a pretty good rule of thumb. Um, yes, and I think sort of everything can fit, and we don't want to just like not ever do any kind of red meat because it's a really good source of iron and it tastes good. Um, so yeah, I think most of the time, and you can find very lean beef, like 93%. So yeah, that seems like a pretty good rule of thumb. I think too,
And then,
like, yeah, we can incorporate more plants too? Don't forget those guys.
sure, of course. And then the other thought I had was to share the significance, because we kind of touch on it, but the significance of sleep in terms of, all of this stuff, and the one sort of overarching thing of all that in terms of recovery, right? It would be sleep. So give me your professional opinion on the significance of sleep and sleeping the right amount of hours, and especially on, event nights, practice nights, game weekends.
Yeah, for sure. So really, it's amazing to me how much happens when we're sleeping. We think of it as like this is your body's like primary time to recover. It's when growth hormone is produced, and so all those muscles are being repaired. It's the memory maker. So all the things that you did both in school or in the game, the drills that you did, the moves that you made, helps to sort of solidify in your brain and sort of sift through them so that you're ready for the next day. Um, those are sort of the biggest pieces that I really like to emphasize when I'm talking with athletes. And also, it helps you so that the next day your brain is kind of cleared out, so then it's fresh and ready to go. And then sleeping also, because your muscles are repairing, then you're not sore the next day and you're
Yeah, and
fresh.
so there was this more specific question too, was, specifically for, call it, second and third graders. I think you had it up earlier, but what would you say recommended sleep would be for that?
Yeah, so for that age, between 5 and 12, the recommendation is up to 12 hours. I think it's 10 to 12.
In the 12. And then another question from the same person too was a thought about snacks. So, the age-old soccer halftime, oranges and sports drinks or water during halftime is something that happens a lot. Is that something that would still be acceptable, advisable, or is there a new oranges at halftime?
Oh, I think oranges at halftime is fantastic because it's nice and juicy. I think that it also depends on, like, they're kind of acidic. So as long as kids can tolerate them, awesome. I think bananas at halftime also works well, or pretzels because they're salty. So we think about bananas because they're potassium. You could do oranges. So I think any of those would work. I think it also depends on the age of the kids. So I love oranges. I have a picture of kids eating oranges on my website. So, and sports drinks, especially if it's like a teen team, where that would be really beneficial to them at halftime because they have higher fluid losses and sweat rates. And so it's going to taste better. They're going to drink more and be able to go back out onto the field better recovered. But any kind of carb-based snack at halftime is a great idea.
Awesome, thanks. And then one other, I'll let someone else chime in with a question, but one over that's in the chat was just clarification on this Instagram account, Don, the one that's the Fueling High School Athletes.
Yeah.
So one of the parents here can't find that feed or that page, if you will. So
Okay. How
yeah,
about,
there's maybe in a follow-up email we can share
yep.
just to just
Yes.
double check and make sure in a follow-up. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you have an opinion on Beyond Meats or the plant-based or the vegan meat that's been coming out lately?
Yeah. So a couple different thoughts are, if you are trying to be more plant-based, and not do animal proteins, but miss them, then it's a good option. If you are just wanting to eat more plants, then I would encourage, you can use those occasionally, but let's try to do more like beans and tofu and tempeh, where they're more a whole food plant and have a whole food plant and will give you more benefits nutritionally. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
got time for, let's call it one more, if anybody else has sort of a parting question they want to share or ask. I think the rule is 7 seconds. So if we hit 7 seconds, no one's going to ask. Well, this has been great, Don. I'll speak on behalf of the group. We really appreciate your time and your knowledge, and even for me and others to have sport specific, scenarios as we discussed beforehand, that are really relevant to the families in our organization, our sport, is really helpful. So that was appreciated that you prepared those scenarios for all of us. So I think you'll share the deck if you have
Yep.
one, and then we've recorded this meeting so people can we'll share that out as well, so people have access to this Q&A portion as well. And yeah, thanks for your time. And if there's anything else, if you have anything else to share with us, I'll give you the last sort of parting words, but we really appreciate you being here. So
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I did a lot of talking, but when I share the deck, I'll make sure that I put in sleep for the elementary students. I'll verify those numbers. I'll make sure that my Instagram links are correct. But I just really appreciate your time, and I wish your kids the best this season.
well, thanks again, Don. Have a great night.
Thank you. Bye.